All right, welcome everybody. Now, before we get started with this video presentation series, let me go over a few things with you and how it's laid out and why it's laid out the way it is. I have divided part 1 into an A and B because there's a lot of information to cover when it comes to each principle and how it does interact with the human body. And to be honest with you, I could probably have a separate presentation for each principle. So I just want to let you know that up front, because when we get into the different aspects of each principle, I couldn't cover everything in depth. Next, empowering you with knowledge is important, but also empowering you with action steps to take is even more important. So at the end of each principle, I'm going to be providing you with action steps, or what I call, enhancement strategies to help you to mitigate anything that's going on as far as any one of these principles, whether it be emotional, biochemical, nutritional, or physical. And at the beginning of this presentation, I'm going to be referencing and referring to a little bit of information from another video series that I'm currently working on, and that video series is called The Next Evolution in the Wellness and Movement Industry. To date, I have officially 10 episodes completed in that video series and working on episode 11. Now and again, I may reference back to this video series, The Next Evolution in the Wellness and Movement Industry, especially when we get into part 2, the actual transformation aspect of my 4 principles to wellness and movement, and definitely when we get to part 3. Now, you can find The Next Evolution in the Wellness and Movement Industry video series either on YouTube or on my Rumble video channels. And just to mention, all of the links for these channels and the references and documents will be located in the description below. And then as we get into part 2, that is the big transformational phase. That's where now I go to the sub-operating system, as I call it, going beyond the mere biochemical and physical aspects of the human body, delving deeper into the body's bioelectromagnetic operating systems. Simply put, the body is electric. And we are currently well into the bioelectromagnetic era. And then lastly, the missing body part, the human biofield. Yes, our body can transmit and receive information. Your body emanates photons, biosignals all the time. This is going to be altogether new for a lot of people. But the information on the biofield dates back well over 100 years. When I first started learning about the biofield, right about the end of 2022, I knew already then that I was going to make a transformation in my service. When I started learning about the body being electric, about the bioelectromagnetic aspects of the body and how it operates, or how the underlying operating system works. But the more I began to learn about the human biofield and how it was kept from us, that's why I'm saying it's the missing body part. Now I know why they did. But actually now it's a science. Well, I don't want to give too much away, but stay tuned for part 3 because it's all going to come together. But I want to start out by just kind of going back and recovering the basic aspects of how each principle interacts with the human body before we get into the whole bioelectromagnetic and human biofield aspects of this amazing organism that goes way beyond what we ever imagined. This human body, this human organism, has more capabilities than we were led to believe. And I'm going to share as much as I have on this information in this video series, and I'm going to continue going down the rabbit hole even deeper in my other video series, The Next Evolution in the Wellness and Movement Industry. So without further ado, let's get started. Fitness is no longer limited to just the physical part of our being. Instead, we should be addressing the interrelationship between the emotional, biochemical, nutritional, and physical systems. There is a new paradigm emerging, going beyond muscles, bones, tissues, and fluids. This new paradigm will address the electromagnetic and vibrational aspects of the human body. After all, the human body is a cybernetic, bioelectric, and magnetic organism, an integrated multi-dimensional system of systems. Back around 2014, I created my 4 principles to wellness and movement. And they represent the 4 pillars of my business, and they serve as the foundational principles to all my services. I believe you must feel well to move well, and move well before moving more. In my over 40 years in the health and fitness industry, I've always cultivated a holistic approach where I treat the whole person. And I've also included not only the mind and body, but also the spiritual aspects. Coming up with the 4 principles meant that I was going to integrate the 4 basic principles to enhancing wellness and movement. Those being emotional health, biochemical health, nutritional health, and physical health. And they all interconnect in the middle, in that image in the middle, the human anatomy image in the middle, represents you and me. And that all 4 of these principles interact with the human body. How we handle stress affects the body. How we sleep affects our wellness. How we digest and what and when we eat and what we drink affect all aspects of our well-being, especially when we come to the last principle, physical health, and how we move. But what I found out was that many people do not understand how the body is affected by a poor sleep-wake cycle, an overabundance of emotional stress, and poor nutritional habits, and their effects on movement. So then my education really started. Back in the 90s, when I was running my first company called the Mind-Body Connection, I had encircled my business with all kinds of experts so that I could properly address the body as a whole. I had built an outsourced referral team. And within that team, there were many types of holistic healthcare practitioners. There were naturopathic doctors, behavioral therapists, Chinese medicine doctors, nutritionists, physical and massage therapists, and chiropractors, just to name a few. And I believe that when I worked with somebody back then, and as much as I do now, that in order to really get them to feel and move well, I had to not only think outside the box, but I had to interconnect and integrate my approach with these practitioners and also communicate with these practitioners so that the right hand knew what the left hand was doing. And throughout the 90s, I seen how this worked for my clients and the benefits that they received and the results that they gained. However, in the 90s, the state of our health and well-being was declining. And I would later find out in my career that this decline continued. And it didn't make sense to me. The healthcare industry is overwhelmed with managing chronic physical and mental illness and is failing to keep us healthy. With all the advancements in medical technologies, orthopedic and primary care medicine, physical and occupational therapy, and advanced studies in medicine, health, and fitness, why are we still seeing a decline in our health and well-being? In addition, over the past 30 years, the concept of wellness has been increasingly embraced by communities, schools, workplaces, and healthcare providers in the United States and abroad, inspiring people to embrace healthier lifestyles. Yet the current state of our health and well-being continues to decline. Over the past 20 years, chronic illnesses like heart disease, diabetes, cancer, obesity, and mental health conditions like depression and anxiety have steadily risen, affecting over half of U.S. adults and a significant portion of youth, driven by lifestyle factors, diet, inactivity, substance use, and socioeconomic disparities, leading to massive healthcare costs and reduced quality of life through some progress, though some progress is seen in cancer treatment. I don't really believe there's been any progress. If there's been progress, it's based on medications and any kind of treatment that is non-holistic. But across the board, when we look at mortality rates versus just people surviving on medications, there's two different things to look at. Increased prevalence. More than half of U.S. adults, over 130 million, live with at least one chronic condition, a number growing steadily. Youth impact. Nearly 30% of young people ages 5 to 25 now have chronic conditions including ADHD, autism, asthma, and depression. Common conditions: heart disease, diabetes, cancer, hypertension, arthritis, obesity, and mental health issues. Depression, anxiety are major drivers. And multi-morbidity. Many individuals have multiple conditions, increasing disability risk. So I want to ask you, what do you think of this? What do you see in your own family, your relatives, your friends? Are you seeing this more and more in the last 10 to 20 to 30 years like I have seen it? Being in the industry and being at the front lines, I see it more reported, risk factors, hereditary situations, and then in my own family. So what I'm saying here is nothing really seems to have helped, even though they said they had the answer for this going all the way back to the war on cancer in 1971, and all this money that we dumped in, our own money, into research on heart disease and cancer and diabetes and everything under the sun. And if we go back in time to the turn of the century, all the answers were there. And I'll be getting to this more. But let's cover another topic, and that is that we are also seeing a rise in autoimmune challenges like diabetes, lupus, fibromyalgia, rheumatoid arthritis, multiple sclerosis, and increases in thyroid-related conditions. In addition, we are also seeing a rise in neurological conditions such as neuropathy, strokes, Alzheimer's, dementia, Parkinson's, epilepsy, and seizures. But another area, this is something closer to my background that I've seen up close, I've been on the front lines of trying to solve the billion-dollar challenge, are musculoskeletal challenges, which have become one of the largest costs to insurance companies worldwide. But the highest cost is to our own long-term health. Now, according to the World Health Organization, 1.7 billion individuals worldwide have a musculoskeletal condition. $568 million of these cases are low back pain. 1 in 2 adults experience musculoskeletal pain. But here's a fact for you. 80% of these chronic conditions can be prevented with lifestyle changes, and I bear witness to that because I've seen that up front when I worked as the director of corrective exercise at Advanced Chiropractic Center, and then also working with people that had back pain while I had my own facility in Asheville, and with a couple of clients that I've had here since I've relocated to Florida. But as I will allude to in a few minutes, the clients that came in and seen me had tried many, many different types of approaches, and yet nobody could figure out their pain. So what was missing? The question we have to ask is why, and again, what is missing? Now, I was seeing this back in the 90s. And by the end of the 90s, I had made a decision to go back to school and to study a form of functional health, holistic health, that would empower me with the knowledge to better help people and to educate people on how to feel and move well for the rest of their life. I needed to go beyond where I was in the 90s. And even back then, using the term holistic became a trend. I found that a lot of times there was no authenticity in the practitioner who used these terms in their marketing slogans. They were using the same principles as they were in Western medicine. In Western medicine, they use medications to suppress symptoms, and they barely look at the body holistically, and they treat symptomatology, and they slice the body up into pieces and parts. And we would go to various specialists only to find that we would be back to get a second, third, and sometimes a fourth opinion, and not getting any help with our health and our movement challenges. In the health and fitness industry, they were not much different. They were peddling vitamins and unique treatments. Not that they weren't working, but they really weren't addressing the body as a whole. They were still segmenting and trying to treat symptoms by using nutrients and therapies, rather than trying to use the body to heal itself by removing what no longer serves it, or by integrating and communicating with other practitioners for the well-being of their patient. In other words, when I work with someone and I'm going to reach out and connect with a naturopath or a chiropractor, I want to integrate what I'm doing with what they're doing so that together we are bringing that person's wellness and movement into a higher level. The right hand has to know what the left hand is doing, especially when it comes to movement, because movement is like medicine. And if it's wrongly prescribed, it can also cause a problem, just like nutrients. If they're wrongly prescribed, they can create a problem. And on both ends, whether we're talking movement or nutrition, if they come from an inorganic source and they're not properly vetted as far as movement, then again, we have side effects. So what was missing is an authentic holistic approach. Now, we look at these two words, holistic with a W and holistic with an H. A holistic approach with a W refers to the whole body. The word defines the consideration of the entire person, which includes the body, mind, and the spirit. Holistic approach refers to alternative healing therapies like homeopathy, Chinese or Ayurvedic medicine, chiropractic approaches, yoga, Tai Chi. These are therapies which in and of themselves will address the mind, body, and spirit, but specifically, they're still isolated in and of themselves. Or you can't just service one therapeutic aspect. You have to service the body as a whole. As Aristotles once said, the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. But if we go back in time, all the way back to the 1700s, lo and behold, we had the answers, but they were suppressed. I think it was 1910 when the Flexner Report came out, when the Medical Association teamed up with the pharmaceutical companies and rewrote history by changing the way they were educating the medical profession. And they then eliminated homeopathy, all forms of natural medicines and herbology at the time, and energy medicine, which were all emerging with unbelievable results. And all of those got suppressed, and they took over, and they created the vicious cycle of sickness, or what I call sick care. So as we moved into the 21st century, a lot of this stuff started to get exposed. And here I was going back to school, studying at the Czech Institute and learning some things that went way outside the norm. And then I was out there teaching the public. Because the other thing is we had to unlearn what we were taught about the importance of water, sunshine, the negative effects of the electromagnetic pollution, that saturated fats were safe, that organic food has more nutrient density than inorganic food. Were people ready for this? A lot weren't in the 90s. But as time went on, especially with the baby boomer population, because they're the I want more generation, they wanted to know more, which is why I kept remarketing and rebranding my businesses to meet the changing needs of the questions that the consumer was asking. They really wanted to get to the source of their pain. But what else was emerging was a way of rating it. One thing that I think the public is really familiar with is a way of rating their health. So you go in for an annual checkup and you check your blood pressure, your cholesterol, you do a blood panel, and they want to see if you're in the norm range so that you don't fall out of the range and move towards sickness or what they call disease. Now, I got to say that their norms are skewed. They're skewed to keep you in the cycle of sickness because sick care is a business. That's really what it comes down to. They turn it into a business system. And sure, once in a while, you get some traumatic relief, you get some remissions, but it's all done with drugs and it's all temporary. And again, going back to the 17 and 1800s, so many of them were doing it without that. So many of the contemporaries of their time. But they rated it all. They had a rating system. So eventually, the authentic holistic practitioner came up with a rating system too. And so did I. I said to myself, if I really want to help people feel and move well, I want to get a baseline of where they're at. I want to know more about their health history. I need to know a lot more about their lifestyle because lifestyle is contributing to all of this. Now, in this short video clip to follow, I explain the relationship between unhealthy lifestyle factors and how they contribute to musculoskeletal injuries. This was recorded back in 2023. You've heard of the term musculoskeletal injuries. So if you have a back problem, if you have knee problems, and you're trying to avoid them, which people are, you have two main risk factors out of 10, but there's two that are primary. And that's your previous injury, and do you have imbalances from one side of the body to the other? One shoulder's higher, one hamstring is tighter than the other, etc. But what we're embracing now is that lifestyle factors also play a role in this. Or are we looking at lifestyle rather than just stretching out the muscles that are tight? Are we understanding why they are? The other thing is, we have to have a way to rate it. Where do I stand? When I look at somebody, are they moving away from, or are they moving towards wellness? Well, how am I going to know that without some sort of a subjective finding? Well, I created a questionnaire. I created a short one called the Wellness Movement Lifestyle Survey. And the survey gives me a snapshot of your lifestyle and doesn't require anything extraneous, but it does give me more information. Yes, I have a lot of questions on there when it comes to your movement, your physical activity, your past fitness experience. But there are also a few questions about sleep, digestion, emotional health. These things are all interconnected. So if we're not looking at the whole and only working on parts, well, then we're going to get the same thing we've seen for the last 35 to 40 years, something that I experienced, and that is just patching people up and sending them on their way. Now, there's a time and place to patch people up. I got to have people, they got to get back to work, they got to get back to their sport. They're in a situation where they have to do that. But for the most part, if you don't have to, then you really should eventually get to the cause of it, because otherwise it's going to cost you a lot of money, which is something else that I began to see with my clients. When my clients come to me, they're bringing me difficulties. I like to work with the most challenging cases, and they have usually been to three or four different practitioners already. Yes, they've been to chiropractors, they've been to nutritionists, Pilates instructors, yoga instructors, personal trainers, etc. So that tells me that there's something still missing. So they're still moving away from wellness. All of your systems interconnect. They all talk to one another. You have a multi-dimensional system of systems. Your body's like a computer. Now, this computer that I'm on, I'm sharing I'm using my Zoom, and I'm integrating my PowerPoint into it. Isn't that amazing? They're both working together. Well, that's what happens with your body. Your skeletal system is directly influenced by your nervous system. Your circulatory system is directly influenced by your nervous system. Your lymphatic system is directly influenced by your nervous system. In fact, your skeletal system can also be influenced by your digestion or vice versa. What I'm getting at is these systems need to be coordinated. Now, I'm not looking at coordinating them into perfect balance, but isn't that what we're trying to do? We're trying to bring more balance to our life and then just maintain it. We're not looking at making things perfect, but we would like them to be ideal. But more importantly, wouldn't it be great if you were empowered to know what you can do so that you can do it when I'm not here? So teaching you that your body is interconnected. That's why I put the little image of the anatomy person in the middle, because surrounding that body, interconnecting the four colors and the four principles within the body shows you that it's all interconnected. You can't have one without the other. Here's the revised slide from that PowerPoint presentation. Now it has 12 dimensional systems of the body, and I've since added the fascia system and the meridian system. So I came up with a short survey that this is what I will use when I do a discovery call with someone. I offer a 30 to 45-minute discovery call, and either they fill this out ahead of time or I go through some of these questions and start getting an idea about their lifestyle. So there's symptoms and conditions, and then I put together a few questions from each principle: emotional, biochemical, the sleep, the food, nutritional, and then I went a little bit more detail into the movement related conditions, so physical health number 4, and starting to get a little bit more of their history, because the mystery to all of your health, or I should say all of your wellness and movement challenges, is located somewhere in your history. I was once told at a workshop that the mystery is in the history. So the survey kind of gives us a snapshot and gives me a rough idea of where your wellness and movement rating is. And then for a more comprehensive approach where I really do the rating and ranking of each principle, I have this questionnaire that goes a lot more into detail, and there's a rating system, and each area is addressed. So not only finding out what your short-term intentions are, your long-term vision, what is your dream, but going into each principle and individually rating and ranking it, and then coming up with a total score for each principle and then totaling up as a grand total for your rating. And I'll go over this a little bit more later in this video. And once I rated and ranked their 4 principles, Then I could find out which principles rated the highest. Now, most people that came to me had a physical challenge. And they wondered why I didn't just focus on the physical. I said, well, I'm not going to carve you out and just look at treating your low back, because patching you up will bring you relief at least 80% of the time. But in the long run, it's going to come back because we're not treating the cause. It was between about 2004 and 2009 that I had a chance to put this holistic approach to the test in a more clinical setting. After I relocated to North Carolina, went back to school, and eventually opened my own facility after working with a chiropractor that was a functional nutritionist and a functional neurologist. And I ran his corrective exercise. I was the director of corrective exercise at his center. And I found that when I could lower the first three principles, lower the rating, mind you, by golly, their physical well-being changed automatically. And then it made it easier for me to come up with strategies to correct the imbalances that I discovered in their movement assessment. So subjectively, I would ask them questions. So, first question I want to ask you is, what is your dream? Are you currently not feeling your best? And if you were, what would you like to be doing? That's the number one question, because we have to have purpose. Everybody's got a dream, and it's not just about getting out of pain, and it's not just about losing weight or getting stronger. What is the impetus behind that? So why do you want to get out of pain? Why do you want to lose the weight? And why do you want to get stronger? When you fill and you answer that question, and if your why is strong enough, then you have purpose. Then we start the questions. So let me ask you this. What are the five most stressful events in your life? Those were red flags. Those were when your barometer was at the highest, and that was captured within your body. Do you react more than you respond when life gets stressful? What time do you go to bed at night? Are you able to fall asleep right away? Do you sleep through the night, or do you get up 2, 3, 4 times and have a hard time getting back to sleep? Do you wake up unrested? Out of the food that you consume, how much of that is organic, non-processed, live? Do you drink tap water? Do you drink alcohol? Do you have some unfortunate habits that you'd like to break, as far as cigarettes or drug dependencies, etc.? Have you ever taken antibiotics? Do you have any digestive issues? How many injuries have you had? And where were they? Did you have head injuries, neck injuries, shoulders, back, hips, knees, feet? Do you have movement restrictions? Do you get pain when you sit long? Do you get pain when you stand a long time? And what kind of exercise have you done, or what are you currently doing now? And were you ever physically assessed? So not only can I rate you subjectively, but I also rate you objectively. And again, what we're talking about here is a new paradigm. And like I said at the beginning of this video, fitness is no longer limited to just the physical part of our being. Instead, we should be addressing the interrelationship between the emotional, biochemical, nutritional, and physical systems. All right, so let's start discussing principle number one. And I want to mention, as I was talking about the rating wellness and movement, emotional health was the highest rating on average for someone that came in to work with me. That's why it's number one. How we handle stress, how we perceive life, how we manage our mind, and finding ways to mitigate our stress, our emotional stress, that is number one. And there are a lot of little tools and things that I provide for my clients to help them to mitigate that. Or I refer them out for additional therapies. It was Canadian neuropsychologist Donald Hebb who said, cells that fire together, wire together. We literally have to rewire our brains. Much like updating our computer software, it involves making conscious efforts to change your thinking patterns and behaviors to foster positive change. I'm not talking about positive thinking. What I'm talking about is the self-talk that we have, or the thoughts that are barraging us every day. We have to come up with a way to mitigate those. And there's a lot of techniques that I teach my clients to help them with that in their everyday life. Research indicates that our thoughts, emotions, and beliefs can impact our physical health through various physiological pathways. I was once told by a psychoneuroimmunologist that the issue is in the tissue. So the issues that we have encountered in our lives, remember going back to the 5 most stressful events in your life, even if they were 15, 20, 30 years ago, those events get trapped in our tissues and they have to be released. But most importantly, we have to learn how to manage and retrain our minds, manage our thoughts, and we gain valuable insight about how emotions get trapped and how they can be released. And by referring you to people that can help you with that, will help you to restore, rejuvenate, and reclaim your wellness. Up to 90% of illness is directly connected to stress. And that thoughts are things. So was discovered by Dr. Candace Pert, a PhD who was an internationally recognized neuroscientist, molecular biologist, and author of the book Molecules of Emotion. Cells are lined with specific receptors that only certain molecules can attach themselves to. These molecules are like messages that communicate between the body, mind, neurons, glands, and immune cells. She also says, as our feelings change, this mixture of peptides travels throughout your body and your brain, and they're literally changing the chemistry of every cell in your body. Now you see the little photons that are between the 2 dendrites in this image? I'm going to be getting to this. Our body is a cybernetic bioelectric magnetic organism. Those are photons, and that's called biosignaling. So whatever you're thinking right now is being transferred through your body. So when you're thinking love or you're in a really good mood, you produce those chemicals. But when you're experiencing things that are negative in life, then that is what you're producing in your chemistry. So even in the National Institutes of Health in 1999, this was published, The Necessary Subjectivity of Body-Mind Medicine, Candace Pert's Molecules of Emotions. So let me just read this abstract for you. This article discusses the relevance of Candace Pert's Molecules of Emotions to the development of body-mind medicine, and argues that Pert's research and conceptual analysis provide the missing link connecting the messages of the mind to physiological effects in the body. The research and analysis also present a fundamental challenge to both the reigning body of medicine and the scientific commitment to so-called objectivity by positing a human organism that can act upon itself with thoughts and feelings, that is, through subjectivity. But that's at the molecular level. However, in part 2, that's when we go to the underlying operating system, going beyond the mere biochemical and the physical as we start to learn how the body is a cybernetic, bioelectric, and magnetic organism. In fact, our emotions are not just chemical or mechanical. An emotion is a waveform. It is a fundamentally electromagnetic phenomenon that gives rise to chemical and physiological changes like heart rate, muscle tension, and breathing rhythm. But the vibrational aspect is primary. If we look at the word emotion, it's energy in motion. We have an energy wave which creates a molecular release. So then you get the dopamine release, then you get the oxytocin release, then you get the serotonin release, etc. That's all propagated. Remember, the underlying operating system is bioelectric and magnetic. So in essence, the thoughts create the waveform, and then again, going back to this abstract, Pert's research and conceptual analysis provide the missing link connecting the messages of the mind to physiological effects in the body, which has been propagated by thought, which is propagated by waveforms, which then gives way to this release of these various hormones in the body. The body's a multidimensional system of systems, and there's a direct connection to the physiological aspects of how the body functions. Hence, the heart rate goes up, you get muscle tension, you breathe faster when you are in sympathetic fight, flight, or freeze. Or if you're in a parasympathetic state, you get into relaxation. You feel at ease. You feel, let's just say you feel good. And your body feels good. So how does that happen? Well, what you're learning here is that principle number one has always been, to me, has always been the motor that steers the boat. That's why it's number one, because once that emotion goes into an energy waveform, it can affect your sleep, how you digest, it'll affect the choices you make in what you drink or eat, and it will definitely affect how you move. So you see how relevant this is, the four principles that is, to movement. And that anybody that comes to me, I don't care if they don't have pain, it's a lot easier to work with them. Or if they do have pain, they have to take into consideration the first three principles. But either way, let's say I have somebody coming to me with a performance-based challenge. They're losing time in the run, they're getting weaker in the gym, they're plateauing, they can't get past a certain weight that they're trying to lose, etc., etc. Well, I'm looking at the contributing first three principles. And that's why people scratch their head when they look at me. What does my emotional state have to do with my plateau? What does my emotional state have to do with where I'm at hormonally? And I know it sounds like common sense to a lot of us, but to most of us it isn't. And then, like I said, then the whole underlying operating system is bioelectric. But what I'm getting to here is what I've found in my research, or in my case studies rather, is that emotional stress was always the driver. So when I start bringing down the first three principles, the physical health rating starts to go down automatically. And it gives me room then to make better, to help my clients to progress better and bring the rating to a optimal level of movement competency. So if you don't have pain, let's say, and you're looking to get stronger and run faster, I'm looking at your four principles. So how are you managing your stress? What kind of sleep are you getting? How are you digesting? What are you eating? When are you eating? And what are you drinking? I'm going to look at those three principles, because if you're at a plateau and you want to get your performance up, I need to look there first. When those areas start to level out and we find balance, hence the word homeostasis, we bring your body back into ease, well, now you get past your plateau. Now you can lose the rest of that weight. Now you can fill in the blank. Now, if you have pain, well, then I have to look at those first three principles. And again, at first, when I started to do this, people were like, well, I really don't want to address all these other things. It's a little bit of work. But you have to ask yourself, What is your dream? What is in your way of you living the life the way you want to live it? And when your why becomes so compelling, you're almost willing to do anything. And in this case, we're doing the right thing by looking at your body holistically, by addressing these four principles, specifically here, addressing the first three first to bring down the pain level, remove the interference, get a little bit of your nutritional health rating going here, or what I should say, work a little bit on your nutrition. See if we can start mitigating this sleep-wake cycle and start giving you tools to manage your stress. It's a very slow process for some people, but you have to start somewhere. And then when the pain starts to reduce and things are starting to feel better in the first three principles, now I can start accelerating how I'm going to design or progress you in your exercise system. It's just easier when you don't have pain. All right. So, but these thoughts are tied to organs, and organs affect tissues. Now, this is also something new to a lot of people. So there are mental thought patterns that result in pain. What we're finding now is that there are pain-related symptoms that are directly correlated with emotional challenges that people are facing in their life. Pain areas and probable causes. So arthritis, feeling unloved, criticism, resentment. Fractures, rebelling against authority. Bursitis, repressed anger. And we look at the body, the neck, refusing to see the other side of the question. Stubbornness, inflexibility. Shoulders represents our ability to carry our experiences in our life joyously. We make life a burden by our negative attitude. We got the weight of the world on our shoulders. And we can go all the way down the human body, and what we're finding is that in the human body we store these emotions. The issue is in the tissue, is what's taught in a lot of massage therapy schools. We're now finding that in the fascia itself, as we're stored emotions, people that have traumatic emotions related to PTSD, those events were stored in the body. Different parts of the body represent different aspects of our life. The neck is voice. The middle of the back is support. The middle to lower back, that could be emotional support. The middle upper back, rather, could be more like the heart and heart support. The lower back could be financial support and financial security and relationships. So now the pain doctor shows up. And of course, yes, we want to reduce your symptomatology as soon as possible, which is our first and primary emphasis. But underneath that software and hardware, there is an emotional connection. So are you going through a divorce, a bankruptcy? Are you going through some financial challenges? Do you have a history of addictions? Do you have unresolved emotional trauma? All of those emotions were driven by an event, how we reacted to that event, how we perceived that event, changed the molecular structure of the body, and a lot of our emotions, I would say all of them, to be honest with you, get stored somewhere in the body. There's also been conversations where organs store emotions. So fear is stored in the kidney bladder area or in the muscle group, the psoas. Are you aware of that? These are just examples, and I don't want to go down too many rabbit holes here, but what I'm doing is I'm tying in the whole thing about emotions. So these muscle groups, which are directly tied to the kidney bladder, which are tied to your adrenal glands. So when you're in high fight, flight, or freeze all the time, which a lot of people are, more often than not, when I'm rating someone's sleep-wake cycle, they're not sleeping deep through the night. They're not able to fall asleep because their day, just throughout the day, their stress hormones are high. So whether they have work-related stress, relationship-related stress, They react more than they respond. They got physical pain. And all of this overstimulates the adrenal glands, and the adrenal glands are neurologically linked to the psoas. Yes, the adrenals and psoas muscles have a significant neurological and functional link, where a tight or stressed psoas can mimic or worsen adrenal issues like fatigue, fight, or flight activation, because the psoas is deeply connected to the nervous system and the body's stress response, often called the muscle of the soul, influencing breath, posture, and even hormone release. But on the other side of that, because see where it says where a tight or stressed psoas can mimic or worsen adrenal issues, well, the adrenals being stressed out, so let's say you're stuck in traffic and you're just burning up inside. You're late, you're mad, you're just reacting more than you're responding. That is, the thought creates the wave of the emotion. So now you have the electrical charge, you have the molecules that go with it. So as the adrenal overheats, it dumps the excess energy into the psoas, and the psoas begins to react. Let me further that point here. So as an example, brain, organs, and tissues. Again, in this example, if energy going through an organ, think of caffeine in your adrenals, is too high for optimal functioning, and the organ overheats, the organ will dump the excess energy into the muscles it shares direct neurological relationship with, first to save itself. The brain will protect the organ by shunting the majority of that energy into its associated muscle. In this case, we're talking about your psoas. Then there's an increase in tone in such muscles, susceptibility to cramping, chronic pain, and injury, development of soft tissue pathologies such as trigger points, and inhibits joint and spinal stability. And let's take it one step further. So let's talk about the mind-body connection. We have these traumas and this emotional stress in our lives, and they get trapped in our tissues, specifically the fascia. The human body is a remarkable functioning organism that stores repositories of emotions and stress. It is now well recognized that the fascial system stores emotional energy and is a key player in the mind-body connection. Neurological pathways. The fascia is rich in nerve endings, making it highly responsive to the autonomic nervous system during times of stress. The sympathetic nervous system, the body's fight or flight mechanism, can signal the fascia to tighten as a protective response. Biochemical changes. Stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline can influence the elasticity and hydration of the fascia. Chronic stress reduces the fascia's flexibility, creating adhesions and restrictions. Memory and somatic imprints. The body has a remarkable ability to remember emotional experiences. Negative emotions such as grief, anger, or anxiety can leave somatic imprints in the fascial system, much like a scar left by physical trauma. Thoughts affect organs and organs affect tissues, and the emotion in principle number one, we have to take into considerations that thoughts are things, and when we are under distress, emotionally speaking, that our body is holding all of that in its tissues. And if we're not addressing that in some way, shape, or form, temporarily, we can always get better, but in the long run, it'll come back until we start addressing the root cause of whatever's in our way physically. Doesn't matter whether you're in pain or not, but whatever's in your way most likely has to do with an emotional connection. All right, so let's cover some enhancement strategies, some action steps that you can take to help lower your emotional stress rating, or just finding ways to mitigate the amount of stress that you're encountering in your life. Okay, one of the things that I teach my client is the art of mind training and increasing their yin energy. Couple things you can do here. So maybe start your day, take a few minutes at the start of your day to sit quietly, meditate or pray. I think the most important thing is before we enter the day and start interacting with especially our devices, before we start interacting with people and situations, we got to kind of get our mind ready. And this is something I adopted way back a long time ago, but I used it in the martial arts to get ready for tournaments and fights, etc. But later on, when I started to really get serious with my meditation practice, I started using it like a warm up for my day, a way of getting my mind prepared, a way for me to get, mentally ready to engage in the matrix and engage with my everyday activities. So I wrote an article which you can find on my website. Go in the menu, go to blog, click on the blog. You may have to go 2 or 3 pages in. The article is called "The Weakest Muscle in the Body is the Mind." And that's what we're talking about here. Enhance your emotional health rating with mind training. And what I've found over the years in studying this art, because it is an art, there's various different authors and methods that I utilize in my mind training technique, is the ability to manage my mind, not take control of it per se, but my ability to better manage my thoughts and get into a better state of mind so that I can perceive and interact with life more appropriately. And what I did is I kind of created my own type of methodology, mind training, and I started teaching my clients various techniques that they can use right away, right in the day. That day, they could leave my office and have some tools to use because you never know when life is going to come up and throw a stressor on you, or your thoughts might get running wild and you might start to get worried or stressed out. And before I mentioned, cells that wire together, fire together. And as you do this mind training, you're rewiring your brain. Now, this is referred to as neuroplasticity, is the brain's remarkable lifelong ability to recognize itself by forming new neural connections, strengthening existing ones, or weakening unused pathways in response to learning, experience, injury, or environmental changes, allowing for adaptation, recovery, and skill development through processes like structural plasticity, physical changes, and functional plasticity, moving functions. It's how we learn new skills from memories, recover from strokes, and even change habits, demonstrating the brain's dynamic, ever-evolving nature. And we have the ability to rewrite our software, if you will. So let's provide you with some other examples of what you can do to enhance your emotional fitness. Because, like I said, if your brain is like a weak muscle, we have to come up with some strategies to get it stronger. One thing I always say to my clients is when life gives you resistance, because it's going to give you resistance. Think of stress, a bad day, bad phone call, whatever. That's resistance because it's pushing against you. In fitness training, when we use resistance, we use it to strengthen our body, don't we? So we're going to turn that around. And that's another reason why we want to use and we want to learn how to manage our mind. Don't think of the obstacles in your life more than just, as Les Brown would say, they're ways of building character. He would say, I had a character building day today when he encountered some stress in his day. And I often, when I'm journaling, which is another thing I'll get to in a minute, and I'll have some stressors and I write things out, get them out of my head, and I'll say, today I learned patience, forgiveness, or compassion. after I've experienced the opposite of that: anger, hatred, impatience, worry, anxiety. Because what can I learn from this? How can I grow from this? We're here to not go through life, we're here to grow through it. And if you're on a journey to enhance your wellness and fitness, or your wellness and movement rather, then you and I both know that you're going to run up against some obstacles. You know, when you work with me, you're on a journey. And I'm upfront with my clients. I'll say there's going to be days you're going to want to quit, you're not going to want to do this, etc. I'm honest with them because I've been there and I've heard it from hundreds of clients. And I said the difference between that day and the next day is the coaching you're going to get and what you can do to grow from it. To grow from it. And the only thing that's going to get you from point A to point B is your mind. And the stronger and more fit your mind is, the further and more you can do. And the more life pulls at you, just like when you get stronger, you can lift more, you can run farther, you can do more. Well, imagine what you can do. Your mind is limitless. We only use a small portion of it. So start in any way, shape that you can to start training your mind. The possibilities of thought training are infinite. Its consequences eternal, and yet few take the pains to direct their thinking into channels that will do them good, but instead leave all to chance. Now, when it comes to various forms of mind training, whether you use meditation, Tai Chi, Qigong, certain arts of yoga, the more traditional flow arts of yoga, anything that can bring you into the present moment. Because the most important thing about mind training is your ability to manage your mind when it gets busy. So when you're doing yoga or you're doing Tai Chi, where is your mind at the moment? It's right on what you're doing. I often would tell my clients that when they would come to work with me or when I go to their homes, that when we start the corrective exercise process or the corrective therapeutic exercise process, that hour that they're spending with me, that's part of their mind training, because each movement that I'm teaching them, I want them to be present so that their mind is communicating with their body and it's not disconnected. A lot of my clients aren't familiar or don't have the patience to meditate and sit still. I think man's weakest ability, man or woman, is their ability to sit still and to be present. So before I recommend that they start a meditation practice, which I may recommend and I may help them to get started or suggest that they find a place where they can learn it, is when we're exercising together and I'm teaching them how to breathe or how to do a certain movement, and let alone at the beginning, all the movements are very mindfully geared. In fact, I have a whole mindful movement exercise system. But it doesn't matter, even if they're doing functional strength training or endurance training, where is their mind at the moment? So little do they know that outside of training their body, I'm also training their mind. Because as they're doing each rep, I'm asking them to focus on what they're doing. And you can take that same focus and use that in your everyday life, so that when you start getting fragmented or multitasking out of control, there's nothing wrong with multitasking unless it gets out of control, that you can come back to the present moment. Which leads me to another aspect of mind training. So let's say that, like for me, I sit in the morning and meditate for an extended period of time. And over the years, my ability to stay present has gotten a lot better than when I first started. I could barely sit for 2 minutes without without losing control of my mind. I could barely sit for a minute or 30 seconds to keep my mind in one place. And now I can sit for over 30, 40, 60 minutes. But in that time, with the repetition of good practice, it's gotten easier to redirect my thinking when it wants to either think of the future or think of the past. Because that's the whole struggle with our mind. We're either contemplating about what we have to do or we're ruminating on what we haven't gotten done. You know, it's okay to set plans, and if you forget that you did something, it's okay to remember that. But to ruminate over the past and worry over the future for extended periods of time is a waste of mind energy. So, in meditation, I simply teach my clients, when your mind starts to go forward, get it back on your breath. When you start thinking about what you didn't do, get your mind back on your breath. Or get your mind back in the present moment. When they're exercising with me, where is their mind? In the present moment. Then as I leave my practice in the morning, my meditation, my spiritual practice, and then I come out here and I have to engage into life. Now I'm interacting with the computer like I am now, or I'm interacting with people and clients, situations. It's the same thing. I got to stay focused. I'm staying focused on what I'm doing right here, on recording this video message, or whether I'm working on a document, like I was preparing this wellness movement plan for this client. Where is my mind? In the present moment. And as you take what you do in practice, it should get easier when you go out in real life and you have to apply it. The more time you spend practicing, the better and faster it responds when you need it. The same thing with exercise. If I'm getting certain muscles back online so that they can work in the real world, so that when you're bending and twisting and squatting and running and lifting or whatever you're doing, they have to work at that moment in real life. But all the time you spent practicing in the morning doing your routine, that carryover begins to be ingrained. Mind training. So another example is the art of breathing. So what I want you to do right now, I want you to sit up real tall where you're sitting. Put one hand on your belly and put one hand on your chest. And I want you to take a deep breath in through your nose, and I want you to feel the hand on your belly expand. So 2/3 of your breath should go down into your belly and out into your ribs. And then 1/3 of it should go up into your chest and up into your upper ribs. And then exhale slowly through your nose. Nasal breathing has been shown to help stimulate the parasympathetic system, which is to rest and digest. Because if you're in a sympathetic state, let's say you're stuck in traffic and your thoughts are starting to get out of control, you're scrambling and thinking, my God, I'm late, etc., etc. I wish I would have left earlier. If I would have left earlier, I wouldn't have been stuck. Who knows, right? And I teach my clients, the minute you get stuck in traffic, start your breathing. Bring yourself back to the present moment and just allow things to work itself out. There's nothing you can do. Text ahead, let them know you're running late, make a phone call, but don't ruminate and start creating a story around that, because then as your sympathetic system goes up and it's out of control, that's when it leads to physical challenges on the body. So corrective thinking also teaches us that it's about choice. You can choose to react or respond. And by correcting your thinking and starting the slow nasal breathing, you're choosing a more of a response to what's happening over reacting. That all goes back to something I hadn't mentioned yet, and that's going back to being mindful, which is one of the strategies that I teach. They use it, in place of medication in some practices. Here it says Barbara Burgeon, MD, recommends meditation over medication to her patients. In addition, just sitting quietly and or reading something soothing for the mind, which I'll be alluding to in a minute here, some self-help books. Mind training doesn't have to be anything real formal. Just sitting and reading something that will help you to develop more of who you are. Self-development is very important. Some of the most successful people that I've had as clients say they spend no less than 30 minutes a day reading a self-help book. And they were the ones that took on the whole mind training stuff 100% because anything that could help themselves to be better at what they were doing, whether they were improving their abilities to run a business, to be a parent, to whatever it is, your mind is going to be the determining factor. And depending on the type of book, as I mentioned earlier, you can use books to help you retrain your mind, along with adding things like meditation, a nice walk in nature, Tai Chi, etc. Or just simply practicing it at will. You're standing in line at the grocery store and you're being held up because they're having a problem with the register. Take that moment to just be patient. Random acts of mindfulness, I call it. And mindfulness is a mental state achieved by focusing one's awareness on the present moment while calmly acknowledging and accepting one's feelings, thoughts, and bodily sensations, finding forgiveness and compassion in the moment, and let go and trust in the process of life. I often teach my clients when you're in the middle of stress, you have to learn to allow, surrender, and accept. Is it easy? No. I'll tell you from my own personal experience, this was difficult for me when I first started taking a more formal approach to meditation in 1995. I had a teacher for years, but by reading the various books, by paying attention to what I was thinking, and by using corrective thinking strategies to correct it midstream so that I wouldn't run that story and get lost in the rumination of anxiety, worry, etc. And then years later in my life, as I went into my late 50s and now I'm into my early 60s, it's so much easier and it's so much more rewarding on my health. I'm on no medications. And I've been through the ringer, just like my clients. Things like this, like that doctor said, she would rather give meditation over medication. You want to lower your blood pressure, you want to re-regulate your blood sugar. One of the many things you need to do besides changing what you're eating is changing how you're thinking. For it is our thoughts that control how and what we do. It was Henry David Thoreau that says things don't change, people do. And like Dr. Wayne Dyer says in one of the books that I recommend for my clients, change your thoughts and you'll change your life. I speak from personal experience. So to close out this topic on, mind training, start with something simple, learning how to breathe. And I want to also mention that if you want to go to my website and go to my blog page, here, I have 2 articles here. Part 1, breathe less and live longer, and part 2. And in this article, I also include a tutorial video, and it will teach you the value of our breath and how often we breathe, which is something else I rate with my clients, and that we actually are breathing too much, too fast, too often, to be honest with you. But use these articles as ways of empowering yourself with knowledge. And then I give practical applications within it, the article. And in part 2, I include a tutorial video right here. So the first dimension of breathing was breathing down into the belly, 2/3, 1/3 into your chest. Now for the second dimension, we go one step further. We still breathe down into the belly first, but now we're allowing and feeling for the ribs to expand outwards. Your hands are there as biofeedback. You're doing the slow nasal breathing, and the pace and the tempo of the breathing will be indicated on your corrective therapeutic exercise system, as everyone has a little different tempo. The main thing here is to relax, focus on the breath, moving it down into the belly, out into the hands. 1/3 is still up into the chest in the upper rib area. Try to relax your neck, your shoulders, and remember to be present and be right in the moment as you practice this exercise. And then you can learn how to start controlling your breath, focusing on your breath. And with all that being said, you can start lowering your emotional rating and enhancing your emotional stress and rating and enhancing your emotional fitness. Have fun and play. Go out and play hopscotch with your kids, tiddlywinks. Do something recreational. Paint, write, sculpt, dance. These are all creative things. They're full of expression. It's a good way. When you dance, you can get a lot of emotions out. And I'm not talking headbanging music. I'm talking just, disco and dance and good sounds, good vibrations, man. And writing. There's a lost art. With the technical revolution well into its whatever decade, nobody writes anymore. And that's an incredible loss of brain connectivity. Writing by hand offers significant advantages over typing for the brain, primarily by enhancing brain connectivity, improving memory and learning, and promoting deeper critical thinking. Enhanced brain connectivity. Handwriting activates widespread and elaborate neural networks across areas responsible for movement, vision, sensory perception. Typing, in contrast, engages fewer neural circuits and results in less brain stimulation. We've actually, when they looked across the board with the amount of kids and young adults that are using computers, the intelligence and self-cognitive awareness and abilities have actually reduced because we're so reliant on technology to think for us. Nobody thinks for themselves. Improved memory and recall. Heaven forbid that would happen. How many people say, God, my memory's getting worse because I'm getting older? No, your memory's getting worse because of your eating plan and because you're not using those muscles. Deeper conceptual understanding. The relative slowness of handwriting forces the brain to process, summarize, paraphrase information rather than transcribe it verbatim, as often happens with faster writing. I get my thoughts out at the end of the day. I love it. Support for literacy development, especially for children. Children, all they do is they stare at tablets all day. And we'll get to that later under biochemical health and the effects that has on your eyes and your thinking. Learning to write by hand is crucial for developing fine motor skills, hand-eye coordination, and the ability to recognize the differentiate between similar letters. Increase creativity and critical thinking, cognitive health for adults. Remember, we're on a cognitive decline because of technology. So have fun and play. Decrease your intake of processed foods. Chemicals in processed foods can cause changes in the gut. The gut talks to the brain all the time. Ever have a gut reaction? What does your gut say about that? Ever hear somebody say that? My intuition. Your willpower's in your gut. Well, what I'm saying is if your diet, if your eating plan is fully processed, then your neurochemistry that helps to operate your brain is toxic as well. Clean up your act and your brain will work better. Self-development reading recommendations. Oh, now you can go across the board. Now, these are all customized based on the client. This particular client, I suggested 3 books. What's in the Way is the Way by Mary O'Malley. Change Your Thoughts, Change Your Life by Dr. Wayne Dyer. He was a staple in my life for many years when I was going through some critical challenges. In fact, I even went to a Wayne Dyer seminar and presentation. That was an amazing moment. Emotional Chaos to Clarity by William Moffat. And there's all kinds of authors out there. You find what resonates with you reading actually a book, not online. Because I'm telling you, these machines they're beneficial. I get it. I'm using one right now, but I don't rely on it. I don't use AI. I don't use the chat. I don't use any of that. I want to use what God gave me. Use your own natural intelligence. All right. So you think that helps? Now you got some empowering enhancement strategies. You can take some action and better manage your emotions so that you can live your dreams and feel and move well for life. All right, let's get ready. Now we're going to move into principle number 2, biochemical health, how we sleep. All right, so let's talk a little bit about principle number 2 in biochemical health. And more often than not, when I'm rating a person's wellness and movement, the second highest rating is usually biochemical health. So, according to the statistics from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, between 50 and 70 million Americans suffer from sleep deprivation. Sleep has long been known as a way for the body to rebuild, replenish, and recover. A healthy body has its own natural sleep rhythm for healing, as well as a natural built-in clock intimately linked to the solar, lunar, and celestial cycles. When the body is overstressed, its natural sleep rhythm gets thrown off, causing a cascade of challenges. When you sleep, you release anabolic hormones to repair and regenerate. So let's go back. Let me ask you again, what is your dream? How do you want to feel and how would you like to move and what's preventing you from getting there? And we just got done talking about the emotional health connection to the body. How many of you out there have monkey mind and you can't get to sleep? Or you wake up, maybe you wake up to go to the bathroom, but you can't get back to sleep, or you just wake up with your mind going. So there's the emotional connection to that. And how important is sleep for you to achieve your dream? So if you are a fitness enthusiast, an athlete, someone that wants, maximum human potential, then you need your sleep to recover and rebuild so you can go out the next day and do what you do, whether you have a physical job, whether you're an athlete, or maybe you go and you exercise 3 to 7 days a week. Or you're coming to me with a health challenge, back pain, neck pain, maybe we have a biochemical issue, and we need that sleep to replenish and restore and to heal the body for that purpose. And I go and I ask people about their sleep, and more often than not, this is what I end up seeing in their rating, that they're in the red, that their stress levels are up all day long, and that's what's interrupting their sleep cycle. So in this unhealthy circadian rhythm, we have what is called an imbalanced biorhythms. So a catabolic response. often referring to a disrupted circadian rhythm, internal body clock, occur when natural cycles of sleep, hormones, and activity get out of sync due to the factors like shift work, jet lag, stress, or inconsistent schedules, leading to fatigue, mood swings, poor concentration, weakened immunity, and increased risk for chronic disease. When we're in this state, our body is out of rhythm, right? So our biorhythms are imbalanced. And as I'll be alluding to in part 2, the body is a cybernetic, bioelectric, and magnetic organism. And when we're out of balance, we're out of coherence. So the electrical system and the underlying operating system thereof, the bioelectromagnetic system, is in disarray. It's disrupted. So if my electrical system was disrupted in my home, I wouldn't get power, or I would get flickering power. And that's what leads to some of these symptoms that are listed here. We get the fatigue. We get the reaction, the mood swings. We react more. We respond less. We can't concentrate. We get the foggy feeling in our brains. We're susceptible to sickness and illness because our immune system has been dysregulated. And your immune system is a circulating nervous system. It has the ability to think, transmit, receive information, and act upon itself without you telling it what to do through biosignaling. So when you're incoherent and your bioelectromagnetic system is out of sync, that's how it directly relates to impaired immunity. And then that leads you more susceptible to getting sick or having a chronic illness. So you start to see how I'm starting to play into the body being bioelectric and magnetic, or what we now call bioelectromagnetic organism. And coherence is when everything is unified. So you're in rhythm. Ever have one of those days where everything is just on, you feel great, you're right, everything is like in sync? So your bioelectric system is in coherence. But when it's not, your heart, brain, and nervous system aren't communicating harmoniously, leading to stress, emotional dysregulation, feeling out of sync, often due to what? Hey, it could be due to an abundance of continuous stress, which so many people are under when they get to me, whether they know it or not. They may know it because they'll say, yeah, I'm stressed out. I've been dealing with this low back problem on and off for 5 years. And lately it's been very painful. So my chronic stress is went into acute stress. Or I may be talking to somebody that doesn't have pain, but they have other imbalances and digestive issues and other issues happening with their wellness. And I come to find out that they have some underlying stress under the radar that's eating at them. The monkey on their back. Boy, that stuff just eats at me every day, Brian. He's a real pain in my ass. The low-grade stress of the financial pressures people have, relationship pressures people have that are in the back of their mind. Sometimes it comes to the forefront, and that's when they react to life. But when they're having to go through their day and try to maintain some sort of balance, in the back of their mind, they're concerned about these other situations. And those things are draining you. And like any electrical system, like your cell phone, it won't work right when your battery's at maybe 3 to 5%, will it? Or if you can't get proper reception because there's a disruption between the cell tower and your phone. So what do? You plug your phone in, don't you? Well, that's what sleep is. You're recharging your battery. That's what walking in nature does. That's what walking barefoot in the grass does. That's when sitting and just enjoying the company of another or the company of nature does. That's what breathing diaphragmatically and doing yoga and Tai Chi do. It re-regulates your system. And like I said, because what we're looking at here is merely the biochemical and physical aspects. We're still at the superficial operating system, which I've been working on for just about my whole career. But what we're going into now, the whole transformation aspect of my four principles is underneath the hood. We have this underlying operating system, which is purely electromagnetic frequencies, light, and vibration. So here again, within each of these principles, I'm going to start tying in a little bit of this sub-principle, which I refer to as let's say, the principle that's underneath the four. So underneath this four principles, so if we peeled this logo back, underneath you would see the sub-principle called electric health. We have emotional health. What we're talking about here is biochemical health. What we're going to be talking about yet is nutritional health and physical health. But as we move into part two, that's electrical health. That's our sub-operating system. And when we look at this, I often will refer to a symbol that I think we're all familiar with, and that's the symbol of yin and yang. Now, I chose to use my branded colors because the person who created my brand, wellness and movement, right? Wellness represents green, which is nature, nurture, to build. Whereas movement can be looked at like yang. Because when you really work out, you're breaking down, because you want to build lean muscle tissue, you want to burn fat, you want to build bone, you want to build endurance. Whatever that is you want to build in your life takes force. So we have the two forces of nature that need to be in balance. And that's your job. That has been my job my whole life. When I got familiar with this, then I made it a regular practice. And now at 64 years old, I have more manageability over these two forces. Yes, there is still going to be yang in your day. There could be yang in your day, like when I get excited to do these presentations, that's a yang response. And I may spend a good hour working on this project in front of this electromagnetic frequency here that's draining me. I'll get to this. But my solution, my strategy, like I mentioned under emotional health, is I'll take a break and I'll go outside and I'll stand in the grass, which brings in my yin. The negative charge from the earth coming in through my feet versus as I'm standing there outside in the sun, whether it's sunny or not. I mean, if it's daylight, maybe it's cloud cover like it is today. The radiation from the sun, the radiating good rays from the sun, I'm not talking about the biosphere and the ionosphere and the magnetosphere that has been manipulated. But in natural terms, before all that stuff got disrupted, we used the sun to come in through the head, the eyes, and the skin, and we used the earth to bring us back into coherence. That's why when someone says you need to take a walk, somebody's stressed out, well, you go walk. That movement creates piezoelectricity. Being outside, most likely, don't go walk on a treadmill if that's not what that person meant, right? Like if you're mad, they'll say, go somewhere and go for a walk. I gave that advice many a times to clients who were stressed out. I go find some place to go take a walk in nature. And if you can, take your shoes and socks off and put your feet barefoot in the grass. That's getting a little bit of yin when you've had a little too much yang stimulation during the day. At the same time, you don't want to be wishy-washy and too yang or too yin all the time either. You want to be able to stand your ground. And I'm saying this in a more conservative, from a more conservative perspective, maybe like Gandhi did. He still wanted change in his country, but he used peace to get there. But he still stood his ground, stood up against Parliament, etc. That's will. So yang, yin and yang, right? That balance throughout the day so that you can get a good night's sleep. Now, I'll be talking about this a lot more when I get to principle 4, but it plays a role in principle 1, because if you're emotionally stressed, in the enhancement strategies, I describe the yin and yang. Now, here we are in principle 2. It's the same thing when we get to principle 3. If your digestion is out of balance, if you have more inflammation, then you have too much yang. So you have to enter foods that are nurturing, like water content food. Get the acid foods out of you. You're bringing up the yin and balancing out your bioelectrical system. Maybe you're depleted of minerals and you're not breaking things down. So I hope that helps to explain or helps you to understand when we look at this symbol. Now, when we look at the symbol, this is more yin and yang, which I'll explain here in a minute. And this is what I would refer to as a yang dominance. And remember, it's all about practice. It's an everyday practice. Some days are better than others, but with the right tools, the right enhancement strategies, or the right action steps, you can find yourself into balance. And as I'll continue now discussing, then you will find your way back into a good sleep-wake cycle. So let me continue on now with this portion of the presentation. So here's our high yang dominance, our catabolic response. Catabolic means to break down. And we don't need to break down any faster than we do normally, but the body has the ability to rebuild cells and tissues on an ongoing basis. But if we're not getting the sleep that we need to repair and rejuvenate our body, then we're definitely draining it, aging it, and accelerating our health into dis-ease. The body is not at ease. So between 10 p.m. and 2 a.m. is when your body is going through physical repair. So how many of you go to bed at night after 10:30 and have a hard time falling asleep? Let alone if you're going to bed at 11, 12, or 1 in the morning. Then you wake up, let's say you wake up and go to the bathroom, but you fall back to sleep. No problem. But if you're waking up 2, 3, 4 times a night to go to the bathroom, or you're just waking up and you're having a hard time falling back to sleep, that's an issue. And that's a hormonal issue, which is probably tied to an emotional issue. Now, if you're getting up more than 3 times a night to go to the bathroom, well, that's another issue altogether. That's hormonal. Those organs are overworking, unless you're drinking a lot of water before you go to bed. But if you're waking up between 2 a.m. and 6 a.m. and can't get back to sleep, well, that's going to affect your psychological repair. And what I mean by that is that's when you're supposed to be repairing your neurotransmitters. So for you to react and respond throughout the day physically, emotionally, to remember things, to have enhanced cognitive abilities, to have good mind management when you're under stress, none of that's going to happen when your chemistry is offbeat, out of balance, because you're not hitting that REM sleep in the latter part of your cycle. So in this image here, you can see that stress repair hormone cycle that is very common today. This is what I see when I do my wellness movement rating questionnaire for people. Their sleep wake cycle rating is very high. So there's an exaggerated stress response, and that the stress hormones don't descend with the sun. Those elevated stress hormone levels can come from a number of sources. Some may include high work-related stress, relationship stress, being stuck in traffic, physical pain, financial. There's all types of stress, and we haven't even talked about the electromagnetic. We'll get to that in part 2, because that also affects biochemical health, principle number 2. All of which can affect a person's ability to get a good night's rest, which is a real concern if you're suffering from an injury to your lower back, or any type of injury or health challenge for that matter. If you're suffering from an injury, if you're an athlete, if you want to maintain your wellness, if you want optimal longevity, then you want to get optimal sleep at least 90% of the time. And this is a healthy circadian rhythm. So this is what I've grown my life to be. I no longer need an alarm. I wake up naturally before the sun now, depending on this whole daylight savings time thing. But there's homeostasis, an anabolic response to build up, to nurture, to grow. So there you are in the morning. You wake up naturally with cortisol, with all the energy, hopefully without the coffee. Then as the day goes by, you then decelerate normally, start winding down, coming into your evening so that you can release the necessary sleep hormones to get into your repair cycles. So this above image shows a normal circadian rhythm and the rise and fall of various hormones throughout the day. There are 2 kinds of hormones. There's stress hormones and growth and repair hormones. The black line represents glucocorticoid or stress hormone levels. The white line represents melatonin. We're using this as an indicator of anabolic hormones or growth and repair hormones. Stress hormone levels normally peak somewhere between 10:30 a.m. and noon, and they loosely follow the rising of the sun. We are designed by nature to do most of our physical activity in the early hours. As the sunset approaches, melatonin begins to rise. This rise in melatonin ushers in a dominance of our growth and repair to help us finish digesting, metabolizing, and assimilating the food in our bodies so we can go into a rest state. So for those who have health challenges, joint challenges, or even anyone, fitness enthusiasts, the athlete, we all could benefit from a balanced circadian rhythm and a good healthy sleep-wake cycle. So principle 2 in biochemical health, I chose to be number 2 based on all the interviews and consultations I've done with people and the amount of sleep challenges that they were facing. Now, I want to talk a little bit about the whole supplement or taking sleep medications, taking something to help you sleep. First of all, don't feel guilty if you're taking a medication to help you sleep. There must be a reason why you need that to fall asleep and stay asleep. Same with supplements. But again, if you're watching this video, you're really interested in finding out the why, the cause behind it. So remember, it's all about what is your dream and what's in the way of you living your dream. Maybe it's your interrupted sleep patterns or you can't fall asleep right away. So let's talk a little bit about why you can't fall asleep and why we're having a hard time staying asleep. Now, the first thing I want to talk about is the overstimulation later in the day. Now, I showed you this healthy circadian rhythm. So we talked about this. Now, this is a good rhythm. This is when your body is in coherence. And first thing first, we rise with the sun. Now, the sun will naturally, whether it comes in through your window, or I would say get a little sunlight in the morning, go stand by the window, go outside, put your feet in the grass. But that sunlight helps to stimulate serotonin, and that's your feel-good hormone. And we need that feel-good hormone so that later in the day we can produce melatonin so that we can fall asleep and stay asleep. So we should be waking up naturally with cortisol. Now, I talked about before, some people have to get up with caffeine. Well, if you need that caffeine to get going in the day, that's already telling me that we have an issue with your hormones and yet you're not sleeping. Your eyes may have been shut, but you're not getting into REM sleep. You're not getting the rest. You're waking up unrested. So why do we need the caffeine? I'm not against caffeine or coffee. If you want to have a cup of coffee in the morning, I will recommend. This is kind of getting into principle 3 here. Now, I'm going to recommend that if you're going to drink coffee, try to make that organic. And another thing you can do is our green teas and maybe some black tea that are naturally caffeinated. If you're going to choose the coffee, though, that you choose an organic blend of coffee. And that way you're reducing the toxins and the other chemicals that are often found in commercial grade coffee. And if you're going to do that, then I'm also going to suggest something. You add a little bit of organic coconut oil or ghee or grass-fed butter. And what that will do is it will slow the absorption rate of the caffeine, which will help sustain your energy and reduce the crashing that often comes when you come down off the caffeine. These are safe ways to integrate caffeine into your eating plan. The other concern about the caffeine and your sleep-wake cycle is the overstimulation of your adrenals, cortisol from the caffeine later in the day. Now, there is a 4 to 6 hour half-life for that caffeine to be working in your system. And the average cup of coffee, and I'm estimating here based on the research that I've done, is about 200 to 250 milligrams, depending on the source of the caffeine. I should say 200 to 310 milligrams of coffee, depending on the source of the caffeine and the amount. So if you're having a large cup of coffee, then you're going to think more than 200 milligrams of caffeine. If you're going to have, like, for example, a large Starbucks coffee, which I would highly recommend that you do not drink that coffee, then you're looking at 300 plus milligrams. Now, that doesn't count espresso and all the other little jazzy things you can do to increase the stimulation of that coffee. 4 to 6 hour half-life. You want to stop all your caffeine by 12 noon, maybe 1 o'clock at the latest, but you're pushing the envelope. All right, so you're pushing the envelope the latter part of the day, afternoon, I should say, or evening. A lot of people have coffee later in the day. Even for dinner, they'll have coffee. Now imagine if you got a 4 to 6 hour half-life and you're having a cup of coffee at 6 o'clock, that's in your system, even if it goes down a few milligrams. So as an example here, 1 large cup of Starbucks coffee, 300 milligrams, 4 to 6 hour half-life. So 4 to 6 hours later, you still have about 150 milligrams in your system. So 4 hours later, it's 10 o'clock. And no wonder you can't fall asleep. And then 4 hours later, you might be waking up again and can't fall back to sleep. And that's still in your system. So it's this whole 2, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Well, we get our highs and lows. I get that. People will tell me, well, I get tired around 2 o'clock. Well, there's a couple of reasons for that. There's nothing wrong with an afternoon siesta. take a nap, recharge your battery rather than re-stimulate it. But if you have your last cup at 11 or 12 and you have a 6-hour half-life, you're good till 5 or 6 o'clock in the evening. And then by 7 or 8, so now you've come down a few more milligrams. And the white line here represents melatonin. We're using this as an indicator of anabolic hormones or growth hormone and repair, or growth and repair hormones. So we want to make sure we don't interrupt this cycle to the best of our abilities, because we are getting ready for repair. And if you're not winding down accordingly and you're still, like, even if it's behind the veil, you're still revved up, then we're going to have a problem falling asleep and staying asleep. So the whole half-life is something people really don't take into consideration because we don't teach them this. 4 to 6 hours. So you have your last cup of coffee at 12 o'clock, and then by 6 o'clock, 7, 8, 9, you're coming down naturally. But if you're having that cup of coffee at 1, 2 o'clock, now you're looking at 7 or 8 o'clock in the evening, and then people will reach for something to bring them down. So then they're going to rely on the alcohol or the sleeping pills or some sort of a substance to offset the energy that they still have. And, it's a wicked cycle of substances on your organs. So it's unhealthy. And bottom line here, what we're talking about is sleep, your sleep-wake cycle. This is the most important aspect to your longevity, because in order for cells to turn over and everything to rebuild, we need to get into a certain state of sleep so that we can initiate that response within the body. But if the body is fighting against being half awake, even though your eyes are closed and you are sleeping, if you wake up and you need that coffee, that tells me that you never hit REM sleep. Now, when I wake up, of course, I don't drink coffee like I mentioned, right? So the very first thing that I teach my clients is the minute you open your eyes and you sit up, rate how you feel. Are you still feeling unrested? Do you just feel tired? Normally, because the first 3 to 5 minutes until you get up, walk around and whatever. How is your initial waking energy? And then wait about 5 or 10 minutes and see if that changes a little bit. And if it doesn't change and you're like, oh, I can't wait to have my first cup of coffee, that's telling me you're not really sleeping. All right, so the next thing I want to cover is exercise, because exercise is like medicine. So really the best time to exercise is early in the day when your cortisol levels are naturally high. Now that's not applicable to a lot of people. I know they want to, they have to get up and they got to get to work. So they're relying on an evening workout. So this has to be very carefully prescribed, because exercise as medicine or movement as medicine, if wrongly prescribed, can really set you up for disaster. You could have a real bad side effect. Like when you get a prescription medication and you get a side effect, that's the same thing with exercise. So you get out of work at 5 o'clock, and if you had an average day of work, regular stress, you cut your coffee out by 12, 1 o'clock, and you're going to the gym. Now that's going to be a stimulus. So you're going to want to monitor how you feel after work. Now, if you're overly stimulated, and I've had clients come in for a session, and I always check in with them first, because sometimes I haven't seen them for 6 days. And I say, well, how is your day? How do you feel? And if I haven't seen them for 6 days, I'm getting a little caught up. How are the last few days been? How was your sleep? How was your stress? But let's just say I ask them how their day is. And they say, oh my God, it was a hell of a day. I was pretty stressed. I'm really looking forward to a good workout today, Brian. Or tonight, because it's evening, right? And I have to make a judgment call. Now, the judgment call is going to be based person by person. Now, let's say I make a judgment and say, we're going to exercise today, but I'm going to moderate the intensity so that your efforts aren't so great because you've already expended a lot of energy during the day. And this is what I refer to, what is someone's readiness for exercise? Here's an article I wrote on this topic called What is Your Readiness for Exercise? Now, readiness for exercise refers to the state of the body's nervous and hormonal systems and its preparedness for physical activity. Factors that can influence your readiness for exercise include your emotional stress level, quality of sleep, what you eat, digest, and drink, and of course, how you move. Each one influences the other, and when accumulated, they create what I refer to as an increased physiological stress load on the body. And when your stress load goes up, depending on each one of these principles, can create a decreased tolerance for the intensity of the exercise. So what I have to do under these circumstances is make an intelligent decision on what am I going to do for that client for the day, for his or her exercise system. So what I did is I created my 5 principles, my 5 exercise principles. And exercise principle number 2 is active rest. If your physiological load is moderately low, exercise should be performed between 60 to 70% of your maximum effort or maximum heart rate, which corresponds to a rating of 3 or 4 on the perceived exertion scale. So here's the perceived exertion scale here. A 3 and a 4 would be moderate to sort of hard. Now, I'm making these decisions because I don't want to drain my client, but I would like to train my client. Well, this has to be done so that the exercise doesn't end up causing a side effect. Because if I make the wrong decision and I train that person pretty hard and heavy, then I may interrupt their sleep wake cycle. And what good is that? Am I training them or am I draining them? Are you training or are you draining your system? Now, you can get away with that. I made that mistake as a young athlete between the ages of 18 and 35 years old. There were days I would train up to 3 times a day. I was training for tournaments, kickboxing, martial arts in general, or training with my professional kickboxer because I was his training partner as well as his coach, and 7 days a week sometimes. But at the bare minimum, it was 2 times a day, 5 days a week, consistently. And then even when I wasn't working out, I was mountain biking, skateboarding, and taking 2 to 3 martial arts classes per week, sometimes 2 times a day. So what I was really doing back then is I was draining more than I was training. It's not using exercise intelligently. It was kind of weaponizing my exercise, and I got a lot of side effects, but I didn't know what I know now. I want to use myself as an example because we have to be very careful how we select our exercise when we choose to do our exercise. And I could have this conversation with many different ages. Yeah. I've worked with collegiate athletes, semi-professional athletes, military personnel, law enforcement, all the way up the board, fitness crazy enthusiasts like myself. And then I have my 60-plus-year-old. So, using intelligence and dispensing exercise without causing harm takes a lot of strategy. When training somebody that's in athletics or in sports, like I did, I had to know how to dispense this exercise formula, especially when I was training athletes in the last 20 years, right? So after I moved from Milwaukee, because I trained a number of athletes there, and my knowledge was different back then. But when I had a chance to really apply this science, the 4 principles, I applied it right to these athletes. So I could still get them to train twice a day, um, for various reasons, but I still made sure they got their sleep, their water, and their nutrition, and their emotional health levels were kept at a good rating. So I still use that four principles. But then I get my clients that are, they're not athletic. They just want to maybe play golf, play a little tennis, go to the gym, or maybe they don't do much at all recreationally, but they want to be able to be fit. And they're 50, 60, 70, 80 years old. Again, that way it's across the board when I talk about how to dispense exercise, how to regulate it throughout your day. Of course, it's a lot more, there's a lot more work that goes involved with an athlete, those who are very serious about their sports and their fitness, compared to somebody who's just recreationally doing it, maybe doing it just to have, to stay in shape 2 to 3 times a week. They're at the gym, or maybe 2 times a week they're working out at home. Of course, it's a lot easier down there than it is up where the person is training 5 to 6 days a week and they're getting ready for a competition, etc. Just so if anybody out there is watching this, I work with a variety of different people and use this principle, and it works. All of these four principles are applied to everybody that comes and works with me. Remember, they're the four pillars that make up all my services. So if you come to me and you're athletic and you're already eating healthy or whatever, we're still going to look at them because they need to be honed. I may just not have to change as much. I work under the adage where if it's not broke, you don't fix it. But if I don't know it's not there, or if I don't know it's good versus I don't know that it's not good, then it's on me. And if you break down because I didn't do the due diligence, that's up to your trainer. That's up to us. So sleep isn't something that's well looked at out there. Maybe it is in the last 3 years, but I'll tell you, when I first was working in North Carolina, and I would ask people that have come to me that have been to physical therapists and personal trainers and all kinds of other practitioners, and I'd say, I'd be looking at their sleep, rating it, and they'd say, Brian, nobody really ever looked at my sleep before. And after I explain what I'm explaining to you here, they're like, now I can see why it's so important. Maybe that's why my back never got better. Maybe that's why my plateaus, I could never get past them. Or maybe I had short-term gains, but I ended up having long-term losses because you're asking me questions that have to do with my lifestyle like I've never heard before. See, the paradigm shift. All right, let me continue here. All right, so let me tie this off. So what did we cover? What did we cover here? We covered the importance of recognizing what could be in the way of our sleep cycle and how we're going to feel when we wake up, hence the sleep-wake cycle. Are we going to feel rested in the morning? Are we going to feel unrested? Are we having trouble falling asleep? Are we having trouble staying asleep? And the reasons that we're having trouble either going or staying asleep have to do what is going on in our lifestyle during the day. I just covered one aspect, and that's physical health. So now you start seeing how I'm tying in the other principles. Like I said, as I go principle by principle, they all interconnect. They don't separate out. There's no way that I cannot talk about your emotional stress levels or your emotional health principle without talking about sleep. There's no way I cannot talk about sleep and not talk about physical health, like I just explained about exercise and what time of the day are you exercising. And then what I'm going to be covering in the next principle kind of crosses over here too, because if you're eating something, if you're eating way too late in the day, so now it's 7, 8 o'clock, maybe you're out for dinner or you're at home for dinner and you're eating the wrong types of food for either your metabolic type or maybe it's just not good food at all. And it has an effect on your digestive system. And then you go to bed and you have a restless night's sleep because the disturbance in your digestive system is affecting your sleep cycle. So yes, sleep and digestion hormones are deeply linked through the gut-brain axis. So through this gut-brain axis, because as I'm going to be discussing in Principle 3, the gut being the second brain, and a lot of what we experience and feel, even though we may process it in the brain, we may feel it through the heart, but we're also feeling it in the gut. There is a direct correlation between a stressed out gut and how we feel emotionally. Researchers at UCLA have known that the brain sends signals to the gut, which is why stress and other emotions can contribute to gastrointestinal symptoms, and vice versa. If you have a nervous stomach, that can affect how you feel emotionally. But what we're talking about here are the hormones that you need to produce for repair and sleep. With key sleep regulators like melatonin also affecting gut motility, while the gut produces serotonin, a melatonin precursor. Remember, I said serotonin helps melatonin, and 95% of our serotonin is produced in our gut, influencing both sleep and digestion, and appetite hormones like ghrelin and leptin being thrown off by poor sleep impacting eating habits. See, that's part of that word coherence, unified, or going back to holistics, right? Whole body, WHOLISTIC, not HOLISTIC, which are more therapeutics. There's no separating how we're going to get good sleep from how we're thinking and what we're eating, and definitely how we're moving. Remember, the main topic is, how do the four principles interact with the body? How do they interrelate? How do they unify themselves together and meet in the middle in this human anatomy image, which is you and I? Here you have your sleep, and here we have how we're digesting, and here we have how we're handling our stress and how we're moving. They all interrelate. I can't sleep. I can't fall asleep at night. Well, like I discussed, what were you doing? What were you drinking? What were you doing? What were you experiencing? And what were you eating before 6 o'clock? We should try to eat our last meal no later than 7, because you're going to need at least 3 hours of digestion, depending. That's not counting caffeine late in the day or alcohol, which also is a stimulant as well as a depressant, because I'm just talking food here. So what are we doing? And then if we're waking up in the middle of the night, that also has something to do with what is going on between 12 p.m. and 10 p.m., or in this case, 6 or 7. So if my client comes in and said, I had a restless night's sleep, first thing I ask them is, what was going on yesterday? Tell me a little bit about your day. And, I'm looking for feedback emotionally. I'll say, did you have any triggered emotions yesterday? Did you get highly stressed? Was the workload high? All right. When was your last cup of coffee? What time? What was going on after 4 o'clock, emotionally speaking? Were you meeting deadlines? Were you under a lot of pressure? Were you stuck in traffic? And these spikes that we have, even if they're earlier in the day, they are a stimulant. So it affects your hormones. And unless you're doing something to come down off of those, which most people aren't because they don't know how to mitigate that, that's staying with them. So if you were stuck in traffic at 4 o'clock, then you got home late, you're eating supper late, and you have all this critical thinking, and you have all this feeling guilty or feeling upset or feeling frustrated. Even my clients, because I don't want them to feel frustrated if something happens, that's just adding fuel to the fire. But if you don't know any better, so you get home and now you're rushed and you eat quick and you're not chewing your food and you're not digesting, and you finally sit down, it's 8, 9 o'clock, and this is without any coffee or alcohol, and sometimes you have a crash. So then you go to bed, even if you go to bed before 10:30, and you end up, if by chance you end up falling asleep right away, but then you end up restless and tossing and turning the rest of the night. You see how, like I said at the beginning, each one of these principles can be a seminar, a presentation in and of themselves. There's so many different variables. But when I work with people, I try to simplify it. And then right off the bat, we got to create enhancement strategies. All right. So I hope that helps you understand not only the importance of getting into a homeostasis, coherent circadian rhythm. And all of this takes practice. Remember, when people come to me, if these imbalances are here or here, some of these things are not going to be changed overnight. They're going to change. Everything's going to take change, or take time rather. We got to come up with strategies, because the one thing that I will say is when all these go up, we got to bring them down. When they go up, they all relate to your physiology. What does the word physiology mean? Well, let's look it up. The branch of biology that deals with the normal functions of living organisms and their parts. The science of how living things, from cells to whole organisms, function, focusing on the physical and chemical processes that keep them alive, grow, and work. So, and what we're talking about here, the physiology of your emotional health, biochemical, nutritional, and physical, and everything in between, because you also have your hormonal in here. But I made it simple. So when your physiological stress load is up, your rating goes up. And as your rating goes up, you're moving away from wellness, moving into the danger zone, which can be referred to as disease, because the body is not at ease. You're dysregulating, the coherence is off, your bioelectromagnetic organism is dysregulated. So electromagnetic isn't working, so synapses and thinking and moving, and you can't, your patience are down, your mood swings, all the things that I mentioned, because your physiological ratings are up. So we need to bring you back into ease. And when we're looking at moving and exercise, like I said, has to be carefully prescribed. Because if your readiness rating is in the red, you have a decreased tolerance for exercise, which means whatever I'm going to prescribe for movement has to be within your tolerance. So then exercise becomes like medicine. Because if it's not suggested or prescribed the right way, it will have a negative side effect. And one of the side effects could be sleep deprivation, could be imbalances to your circadian rhythm. So do we work in or do we work out? Do you need more yin in your exercise routine at the end of the day, which will help to modulate, mitigate these things, which we're going to get into next, because now we're going to talk about enhancement strategies? Or are you in a place because you got good sleep and you're handling your day right, that you can work out and you can do more yang? So I want you to understand that, no, there's no perfect day, right? But even like myself, if I plan on working out in the morning, because I do all my working out in the morning hours when my cortisol is the highest, I got to make sure that the day before things are set up right so that when I get up, I can work out. But things happen, right? Maybe I wake up there in the middle of the night because of noise. Maybe I went to bed later than I wanted to. Maybe I got overly stimulated later in the day because I'm working on my computer and it affected my sleep. We'll talk about this in principle or in part 2. Well, then I wake up and I work in, and or I use my 5 principles. Maybe I do an active rest. Maybe I only put out 60 to 70% effort. But what I'm saying here is how we prepare for sleep and what we're doing in our lifestyle, those two things. So whatever our lifestyle is dictates how we're going to sleep. However we're preparing for sleep is going to dictate how well we sleep. I remember an old saying, I forget who said this, but the more you prepare, the less you despair. So if you're doing the right things and getting ready for sleep, so if you're getting your landing gear in here, this is a normal circadian rhythm, and you're doing the right things right between 6 and 10 to go to bed by 10:30, right? You're winding down. I remember my mother having a wind down period so that I could sleep at night when I was a baby, when I was a child, rather. There was a wind down period. You had to, otherwise I'd be up all night driving my parents nuts, and kids will do that. But you get what I'm saying? Sometimes you have to implement a strategy and come down from the day. Stress is unavoidable. I get it. But if we have better tools, better action steps, and enhancement strategies, we can grow through them better and we can sleep sounder. All right, so let's talk about some enhancement strategies or action steps that you can do to help you get a good night's sleep and not rely on other things to get you to sleep. All right, last meal of the day. Make the last meal of the day. Try to eat your last meal by no later than 7, preferably by 6. I know there are all kinds of people out there. I know it's tough. Family situations, after work things, kids got sports and all that sort of thing. That's a whole nother topic. But try to get your last meal of the day in by 7 o'clock. And it should be the smallest meal for various reasons. Chew your food. Don't drink water with your meal. Now, this is going to be a carryover into the next principle, but I want to cover it here under biochemical health in principle number 2. No simple sugars. Stay away from acid drinks like coffee in the evening. Stop all caffeine intake by 12 p.m., 1 at the latest. And remember, organic coffee, maybe some green tea, maybe some black tea. And try to add a little bit of coconut oil and grass-fed ghee. Remember, by adding this fat to your coffee, it slows down the absorption rate of that caffeine and really kind of pulls back the reins a little bit on the adrenaline or the adrenal response that you get from the caffeine. Preparing to sleep. Do your best to get to bed between 10 and 10:30 each night. Try not to eat 2 to 3 hours prior to going to bed. Now, I say 2 hours because if you're not going to have any protein for your last meal and it's a small meal, it only takes about 2 hours to digest. Remember, digestion is one of the highest energy producing systems in the body. So you don't need to have that engine running while you're going to bed, because even if your eyes are shut and you think you're sleeping, you're not hitting REM sleep. If you have protein, then you got to allow a good 3 hours. And remember, it should be a small meal. If you eat a big meal, you're going to need at least 4 hours, 3 to 4 hours. Wind down prior to going to bed with some light reading. Get away from the LED lights, get away from the blue screen or wear glasses. These are daytime blue blocking glasses. You can get the red ones for the evening, but you want to decrease your exposure to the LED lights. We'll get into all the smart lighting, hopefully in part 2. I don't believe in any of that stuff. What I did in my home is I switched out all the LED lights. There were no fluorescents in this house. I changed all my fluorescent lighting in my facility in Asheville to all full spectrum lighting. And I teach my clients how harmful the fluorescent lighting, the LED lighting, and now we have all the smart lights, which I'm not going to get into at all in this topic, because that is that I'm going to save for the next evolution in the wellness movement industry video series, because then I can really go into some detail. But let's just say they're actually, how can I say, they're interacting within your body, not just emanating light to illuminate your space. They're interacting with your human body. But like I said, I'll save that for my video presentation series, the next evolution in the wellness and movement industry. So let's take a look at the negative effects to fluorescent and LED lights to your nervous system, because what it does is it arouses you. It keeps you aroused, keeps you awake, and the constant barrage coming off of these lights in the way of UV or blue lights, we're also going to take into consideration our computers, have an effect because it goes through your eyes and has an effect on your central, autonomic, and peripheral nervous system. So this article is found on the same website where I get my black blue light glasses from. The horrors of working and living under fluorescent and LED lights. How you can avoid them. So let's go start right here. Children spend up to 7 hours in school classrooms under artificial lighting, while adults can spend 9 to 10 hours a day in harsh office lighting. If we add up all the hours we spend working indoors over a lifetime, our exposure to these intense artificial light sources is alarming, not to mention the bright screens we constantly stare at. And again, that's why I wear these glasses, and that's why I limit how much time I spend at a crack in front of the screen. In fact, I just got done taking a break, getting away from the screen, doing a little outside grounding. Sadly, most people are unaware that lighting in our school, work, and home environments has a huge impact on health and productivity. No, we have kind of an idea. I think now in 2025, and now we're in 2026, I sit down with the average person, and a lot of us are aware of this. You know, you can't go into your classrooms or your workspace and have them change the lighting. Be nice if they did. In some workspaces, like my workspace, when I moved in, like I mentioned, when I moved into my workspace, it was all incandescent, fluorescent lighting. I changed it all out because I wasn't going to expose my clients who were going to be there for an hour, 90 minutes, let alone if I'm teaching a weekend workshop, I'm not going to expose them to the negative side effects of those frequencies. I minimize that to as much as possible. But if your workplace doesn't do that, then what I would advise that you have to come up ways of mitigating that electromagnetic pollution. And again, like I said, the sub-principle, we have the 4 principles. The sub-principle is electric health. So we also have to have strategies in place to mitigate what's happening at the bioelectric and magnetic level of our body. You can mitigate dehydration with water. You can mitigate toxicity to changing what you eat. You can mitigate emotional stress by practicing Tai Chi, meditation, deep breathing, etc. You can mitigate the chances for injury by getting assessed, correcting imbalances, stretching, etc. How do you mitigate the detriments to your body's bioelectric and magnetic system? Well, by doing some of the things I'm suggesting here. When you come home, you have your own environment. So you make changes. And when I get into part 2, I will give you enhancement strategies to rebalance the dysregulation that you're getting from these types of lights. Say, for example, you leave work and you get home, or maybe if you have time, either you do it when you get home, or maybe if you have time, stop. Take your shoes and socks off and ground. That's going to already bring your body back into balance. Take a walk. So grounding, taking a walk, getting outside in the natural sunlight. There's nothing wrong with the sun. All the misnomers about the negativity of sunlight. I'm not saying go out there and bake in it in the middle of the hottest day, in the hottest time of the day, which is the middle of the day. I'm not saying that, but I'm also don't want you to think that it's all about harming you. The natural light. You ever feel better when you take a walk out in nature? Why is that? Because when you're walking out in nature, your field, your body's biofield, your body's electromagnetic field, is directly connected with what's around you. The plants, the trees, the air, the sun. Being in nature feels good because it lowers stress hormones, cortisol, boosts feel-good chemicals, serotonin, dopamine, endorphins, provides calming sensory input from the sights, the sounds, and the smell of the plants. Chemical signals, so that's also biosignaling within the plant, because the plant is also a bioelectric and magnetic organism like the human body. Helps to regulate sleep via natural light, offers a break from overstimulation, and even gives the immune system a workout, all contributing to reduced anxiety, better mood, improved focus, and physical relaxation. Whether we're talking about what's vibrating off the plant, going for a walk in nature, being in nature, being next to flowers, being next to water, getting the natural sunlight, what we're talking about here is this is a more positive way of using the sun and using plants and the earth and nature to help mitigate the arousals that we get throughout the day, whether we're talking about the exposure to light from the light over our heads or in our homes, in our offices, or the overexposure to our cell phones, our laptops, and our tablets, and in our home computer devices. The history of electricity and how lights affect us goes all the way back. You know, there are a couple of books that I read that were pretty fascinating, and starting around episode 7, I started to review the works of Robert O. Becker, The Body Electric, and what he was discovering, that the electromagnetics coming off of the radio towers, microwave dishes, and even our power lines back, he was looking at this back in the 50s, 60s, and into the early 70s, there were negative effects on the human body. He was looking into the negative effects of this radiation. And here he says, I have no doubt in my mind that at the present time, the greatest polluting element in the Earth's environment is the proliferation of electromagnetic fields. And here, Dr. Robert Becker has his research career ended after the 60-minute segment aired about the truth of non-native EMFs, where the journalist asked, are you telling me there's a possibility that electric current generated in a fashion such as this could possibly cause heart disease and or stroke? And his response was yes. I'll have a link for this interview, and let me just say that this non-ionizing EMFs and everything else to do with electromagnetic pollution has a direct effect on our sleep-wake cycle. I'll be covering this a lot more in part 2. It was way too much. Our bodies are of course a cybernetic, bioelectric, and magnetic organism. We are giving off photonic energy all the time. That's why when you walk into a room after an argument, you can feel that, can't you? As opposed, or in contrast rather, when you walk into an environment that's very joyous and loving, like the church, or being next to a stream, or being at a christening, or maybe an enjoyable event like a wedding, you feel those vibes, man. Everything is floating around you, and it affects the body. And I go into a lot of detail in my series, The Next Evolution in the Wellness and Movement Industry. And then we walk around in this environment called the Invisible Rainbow, the history of electricity and life, written by Arthur Furstenberg. And I go into great detail, and he talks about how if you go back to the classroom and the workspace, and you have all that negative lighting, and it's affecting your field. It's like walking into a room after an argument. How long do you want to stay there? Compared to being next to a waterfall. How long do you want to stay there? But we're immersing ourselves into this field of light, and it's disrupting our own transmission and reception to how our body operates on the inside, because on the inside it's all biosignaling, photonic signaling, electrical transfer, molecular transfer. Everything is happening at that scale underneath the cells, the skin, the tissues. Like I said, if you pull everything back, it's all frequencies, electricity. It's disrupting that. Another example I can use are the old radio antennas that I grew up with. And you dialed in your favorite radio station, right? You dialed it in and you got your favorite radio station. And if you moved the dial too much to the left or to the right, you got static, didn't you? But that antenna that was facing out of that radio, that picked up the frequency for your band. So how many different stations did you listen to as a kid? I had 4 of my favorite radio stations. They each had their own band. Well, how did that get to that radio? Through the air. The air became a transmission medium. The air carries everything. So in that air, in that office or that classroom or underneath these lights, you're getting emitted by this, and it's affecting our health. We're looking at ways of mitigating mitigating the things that are creating a poor sleep-wake cycle, which will lead to poor health. Problems with modern lighting, flicker, color, temperature, and toxicity. Now, I'm going to leave a link for everything that I'm going to show you here in the description below so you can do your own due diligence. So get your Google fingers out and get to work. Flicker. Conventional fluorescent and LED light bulbs fluctuate in brightness many times per second, just like your television set or your computers, because the alternating current electricity is not constant. This results in flicker. Another cause of flicker is CFL or LED lights, working on a dimmer switch without enough electrical resistance. In the past, flicker was noticeable and sometimes even audible. Due to the improvement in lighting technology, visible flicker has reduced and is now largely invisible to the eye because the fluctuations happen so rapidly. However, even if it's not consciously noticeable, flicker can still be picked up by the brain and irritate the nervous system. The pupils of the eye should contract in response to bright light and dilate in dim light. However, with the extremely rapid dimming and brightening of high-frequency flicker, the pupils could remain dilated. So the key words here are consciously noticeable. They're not consciously noticeable, but you're still picking them up. You're picking up these light waves unconsciously. You don't see them because you can only see 0.0035% of the visual spectrum. Now, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to share a slide from one of the presentations I gave in one of the episodes from my Next Evolution in the Wellness and Movement Industry video presentation. And I want you to listen carefully because this will have to do with everything going forward. Because remember, the underlying theme here is the transformation. So going beyond the mere biochemical and physical, Sort of what we're talking about here is going beyond that, and we're looking at how light can affect our circadian rhythm and disrupt our sleep-wake cycle. It's more than meets the eye. Just because you can't see it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. The average person rely on their senses to determine what is real. If they can't see, touch, taste, smell, or feel it, we tend not to believe it. I'm referring to the vibrating energy frequencies that are in and around and all around the human body and living things. And remember, your human body itself is emitting photons and electrical energy all the time. We are more than just our physical body. The human body is, in fact, an energy emitting field of light and electromagnetic energy. Although you can't see it with the human eye, it radiates all around you. Visually, the human eye can only see 0.0035% of the electromagnetic spectrum that exists in the space around every living thing, including the human body. So outside of our visible light spectrum, you can't see the radio waves, the microwaves, the infrared, the ultraviolet, X-rays, gamma rays, EMF, ELF, and I can go on and on and on, and they're barraging our body all the time. So like these lights that people are sitting under, it's constantly barraging their bodies. And that flicker has an effect. So here's the effect: eye strain, double vision, headaches, migraines, stress, poor concentration, reduced task performance, fatigue, and repetitive behavior in autistic people. A 2010 study found that people in office settings with non-visible flicker from conventional fluorescent lights had heightened central nervous system arousal and lower performance accuracy. So let's look at that study. And here is the National Library of Medicine, NIH, the impact of flicker from fluorescent lighting on well-being, performance, and physiological arousal. These results may be understood in terms of heightened arousal in the central nervous system in response to the pronounced light modulation caused by the conventional ballast. In order to alleviate this potential stress source, it is recommended that fluorescent lighting be powered by electronic high-frequency ballast of good quality. Well, that's, of course, what they're going to say, the National Institutes of Health. But what I would recommend that you look into are more natural forms of lighting, like incandescent light bulbs. An incandescent light bulb produces visible light by the energy running through the filament and heating it so much that it glows. The higher a bulb's wattage, the brighter the filament glows. Even in the basic essence, an incandescent light bulb has the most similarity of form to natural sunlight. Here are the benefits. The full balanced spectrum of visible light provides nourishing regenerative infrared light, low flicker, low EMF. Now again, I will leave the link for this short article in the description below. And I ordered my incandescent lights through Amazon. So here you can see the Unilamp Edison bulb. I ordered 40 watts for my living environment. Incandescent lights offer potential health benefits primarily due to their low blue light emission and warm, full spectrum glow. Improves sleep quality, reduces eye strain and discomfort, and support for circadian rhythms, potential cellular benefits, higher color render index, meaning they accurately represent colors and textures. The natural appearance can enhance visual comfort and mood in living and working spaces. So I've given you a lot of good advice on what to do to enhance your ability to get a better night's sleep. There are plenty of action steps now. And in part 2, when I get into looking exactly at how the body is a bioelectric or cybernetic, bioelectric and magnetic organism, I will show you that, how it gets disrupted I've only touched base on some of these things, and I'll keep touching base even into part 1B. But there again, I will also have enhancement strategies so that you can mitigate around this, because we are definitely well into the bioelectromagnetic era. We are going further into the technological era. We are well into artificial intelligence. We are well into 6G. They're already getting into 7G. And now they are penetrating your skin. Going back to the radio antenna to get your favorite radio station, your body is an antenna. That's why you pick up waves and vibrations when you are in different environments. Your body transmits and receives information. All right, so to tie this off, to get a good night's sleep and to wake up refreshed, start applying some of these strategies in your life and see how it changes. When in doubt, get the phone out. If you want to schedule a free 45-minute wellness movement lifestyle survey discovery call, let me get a little bit more of your background and give you some insight. Or if you'd like to check in to see about a comprehensive consultation or working with me, I'd be happy to share my knowledge with you and help you so that you can live your dream and feel, move, and be well for the rest of your life. All right, I'm Brian Schwager saying have a beautiful day. Thank you so much for tuning in. Remember, share if you care, and I look forward to seeing you in part 1B. Bye for now.